Okay, sorry about that. I'm gonna wait a little bit just to make sure people come back online. Um, so we were talking about. I'm gonna talk a little slower so people can log on. We were speaking about the 28th, article number 28. Okay, so now article number 28. Ayatollah Subhani, what he does is he looks at this whole story of Tawhid, of God. He looks at it from two angles. The Tawhid and God's essence itself, okay? He looks at it from two angles. Number one, he looks at the oneness of God in his essence itself. And he explains, he says that there is one God only one God, not just like we have one, I don't know, one book and one laptop and one computer. No, because those can be replicated. Yeah. But it's impossible to replicate God. It's not even possible because this is a one that cannot have a two because this one has filled up all of existence. When there's no room for anything else, right? You're not going to have another one. It's impossible to have another one. God's oneness in his essence, he says, is like that. It fills up everything. And so he's going to only be one. He adds to that. He said God's oneness, if you look at it from another angle, God is basit. God is simple. God is one thing only. It's not a combination of things. It's not made up of parts. God is one, meaning he doesn't have any parts and it's just totally simple. Okay. He explains that, and we went through it last week and we had some hadiths, which brings us to today now, to tonight. Tonight, we're talking about, we move into article number 29, okay? Article number 29 speaks about the second category, okay, of God's oneness, which is God's oneness in his sifat, in his qualities, okay? He says, now, personally, let me say this before I actually talk about what Ayatollah Subhani says. He says that, I think personally, actually, I think all of this, we don't even have to discuss this too much. I mean, right now, as I go through it, you guys will see it's not a very complicated thing. It's a very simple subject we're going to talk about right now. But since there has been lots of discussion in the past in classical theology and history of theology, Islamic theology, I think that's why he brings it here, just to clarify what the Shia stance is regarding this issue. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Shuja. Okay, so he says, what's he talking about here? What does he mean when he says we have Tawhid when it comes to the qualities of God, when it comes to the attributes of God? Is that he says, look, when we look at God, we find that he is alim, okay, he's all-knowing, qadir, all-powerful, hayy, alive, yeah, but of course his life is not like our life which we can lose. His life is eternal. He is all-hearing, all-knowing, okay, all-seeing. Now, question, these attributes of God, okay, these attributes of God, are they the exact same thing or are they different things? When I say, for example, God is all-knowing, does it have the same definition that all-hearing has? No, these do not have the same definition, okay, they have two different definitions. Seeing is one thing, knowing is another thing. Power versus hearing, these two are not the same thing. Hearing has its own definition, power has its own definition. So in theory and in concept, each of these attributes that God has is other than the rest. Okay? So that's in concept. That's in our mind. Okay. But then he says, some people have thought that since in our minds these are each separate from each other, then they're probably also, God is made up of these different attributes, and these are components of God's existence. These are what make God's existence up, right? He says this is where the problem is. Just because they are other than each other conceptually, okay, doesn't mean that in their existence too, they have different existences, okay? This is something that's very clear though. Right? This is something that's very clear. Okay, for example, when you look at me, I have different characteristics, right? A person who looks at me can derive different characteristics from me. But at the end of the day, am I one person or am I several people? Or can you point to a part of me and say, oh, there's his knowledge, oh, there's his power, oh, there's his hearing, there's his seeing. You can point to my ears and say those are his ears, but you can't say that's his hearing, right? So the characteristics that I have, okay, they all are derived from me. I have one existence though, and I'm not made up of these different parts, quote unquote. Same thing with God. With God, we have that He is all knowledge, and especially since we said God is simple. He's not a compound being. Or if He's just one big piece, let's call it, for lack of better terms, because that is the worst way to describe God. If God is just one big entity and is not made of different components, then when we say He is knowledgeable, that means He is all knowledge. When we say His power, that means He's all power. And all of these different attributes can be deduced from Him and derived from Him. It doesn't mean that now He has different parts or He has different existences. No, not at all. Because He can do whatever He likes, we call Him Qadir, all-powerful. Because He has knowledge of all things, we can call Him the Al-Alim, the all-knowing, right? But these don't mean that He is different when it comes to He has different existences or is made up of different existences. No. Okay? And that's why some philosophers have said, Ayatollah Subhani, he quotes them here. He says, "Bal huwa ilmun kulluhu." As a matter of fact, He is ilm completely. Qudra kulluhu. He is qudra entirely. Hayatun kulluhu. He is life entirely. And so on and so forth. Yeah. So then he brings a hadith. We go down a little bit. He brings a hadith by Imam al-Sadiq. He says, "Lam yazal illah jalla wa az rabbuna wal ilmu dhatuhu wala ma'lum." This is super important here. Look at that. I'll explain. "Was-sam'u dhatuhu wala masmu' dhatuhu wala mubsir or mubsar wal-qudratu dhatuhu wala maqdur." He says, Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam has said that Allah Azza wa Jal has always been our Lord, while His essence is knowledge. Even when there was nothing to know. Wow. Even when there was nothing to know, God was all-knowing. Yeah. He is as-sam' kullu dhatuhu. His essence is hearing, is all-hearing, even when there is nothing to hear. So it's trying to say that these are part of His essence. These are all part of His essence and are derived from His essence. Al-qudra dhatuhu wala maqdur. He's all qudra, He's all power, even if there's nothing that He needs to overpower. Alright, that's one hadith. Another hadith in Nahj al-Balagha that Ayatollah Subhani cites here, he says, and this is a famous line in khutbah number 1 of Nahj al-Balagha, sermon number 1 of Nahj al-Balagha, وَكَمَالُ الْإِخْلَاصِ لَهُ نَفْيُ الصِّفَاتِ عَنْهُ لشهادة كل صفة أنها غير الموصوف وشهادة كل موصوف أنها غير الصفة. He says, if you really want to understand His Tawhid, if you want to have ikhlas, pureness when it comes to the Tawhid of God, then you have to negate all attributes from Him. Why, Imam Ali? Why? Not that God doesn't have attributes. You have to be super careful when it comes to attributes of Him. Why? Because when you attribute things to Him, when you say He's all hearing, okay, when you say He has hearing, He has knowledge, these imply, these descriptions, these attributes, these characteristics, they imply that they are other than the one who possesses them. Think about it. If I am holding a pen, right? If I'm holding a pen, I am one thing, the pen is another thing. If I am a possessor of the pen, that means the pen is something else, right? That's what it implies. Imam Ali says you have to be so careful when you're attributing things to God. He has these attributes, of course, but if you really want to understand Him, you have to be careful, because even when you attribute things to Him, it implies that His sight thing and His essence is another thing. And this is a mistake that some people made when attributes were attributed to God. when characteristics were attributed to God. They thought that, okay, this must be a part of him, and since he is eternal and he has always been there, then these are also have always been there. These are also entities that have always been there. So now all of a sudden your one God turns into like 8 gods, because there's 8 main characteristics of God, or 7, or whatever. All right, so that's regarding the Tawhid as-Sifati, Tawhid as-Sifat, characteristics of God, and the Tawhid of them. That he has all these characteristics, but at the same time, he is still one. Okay. Now, moving on. The 30th article here, which is it has to do with the third category, or third form of Tawhid. And that is Tawhid in his creatorship. Let's call it Khaliqiyya. Yeah. When it comes to creation, he is the only one who creates. Okay. This is something we need to talk about a little bit. And then we'll get to the main one, which is the next one. Although this one's going to take some time too. All right. So let's talk about it. In creation. Okay. What it means is very clear, that God, when he creates, he's the only one who creates. He's the only one that can be responsible for creation. Number one reason for this, he brings 2 examples from the Quran. قُلِ اللَّهُ خَالِقُ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ وَهُوَ الْوَاحِدُ الْقَهَّارُ. Say that Allah is the creator of all things. Okay? Surah Ra'd, verse 16. Okay, that's very clear. Okay, Allah is the one who created everything. All right. Next verse. ذَلِكُمُ اللَّهُ رَبُّكُمْ. He is God, he is Allah, your Lord. خَالِقُ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا هُ. The one who created everything, there is no Lord but him. Okay? So that's a revelation, that's wahi, that's Quran, that tells us that, no, okay, so when it comes to Khaliqiyya, when it comes to creation, he's the only one who's in charge. Okay? He's the only one who's actually doing it. But then if we have a question here, and that is that, okay, wait a minute. Creating, okay? For example, a person makes a table, makes a chair, these kinds of things. Or rain is created. I don't know, earthquakes are created, whatever, of natural phenomena out there. Okay, God is the creator of all of these, right? You say, yeah. But then the question will arise that, okay, wait a minute, but we know that there's causality also, there's cause and effect as well. Does this law of Tawheed in Khaliqiyya, Tawheed in creation, go against this principle or not? Okay, Brother Bilal, you're asking a question, but I think you can tell it's not too relevant right now. That's something that can be discussed though, inshallah. But if it's okay with you, let's move on right now. We'll talk about it later. Yeah, so that's the question. Does this Tawheed in creation go against Tawheed, this whole concept of causality and how there's cause and effect in this world? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, no, that is not the case at all. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself has created this universe in this way. Okay, so when he creates it, he's the one who's creating it. But the way it is now, the way it is, it runs with the system of cause and effect. That's just how it is. We have to understand, brothers and sisters, by the way, philosophically, you can't call making a table or a chair, you can't call it creation. Creation means to bring from non-existence to existence. Okay, that's what creation philosophically means. And that's where the word fatir takes meaning. In the Quran, fatir is referred to Allah. Allah is referred to as fatir, okay? Fatir means to bring from somewhere, from non-existence to existence. Allah is fatirus samawati wal ard. He's the one who created, but created from non-existence the heavens and the earth. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind. He says the Quran itself tells us that there's this cause and effect is honored and acknowledged by Allah. The Quran acknowledges it. Surah Rum, verse 48. Allahu alladhi yursilu riyaha fatuthiru sahaban fayabsutuhu fis sama' kayfa yasha. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who sends the winds, and these winds stir up clouds and so on. So Allah is behind all of it. So even if there's a cause and effect, one, and two, you want to look at it as creation. So rain coming down, effect, cause, I don't know, skies. Allah says, look, I'm the cause of these causes. I'm behind it all. Right? Now, once again, there's a lot of subtle explanations here. And some very, very detailed discussions that go into all of this that are being skipped by Atullah Subhani right now. As we've said again and again, this book is not for getting into details, it's just to cover the basics of our faith. Now, someone might ask, a question might come up here, brothers and sisters. A question might come up, okay, God is behind everything, right? He himself is saying it, right, in the Quran. Does that mean that even our bad actions, we can attribute them to God? Right? That's a good question. Can we attribute our bad deeds and actions to God? Answer is that no. Because when it comes to man and mankind, not just mankind, the jinn as well, anyone who has taklif and is duty bound in this world and in the universe, we don't know what other creatures are out there. We don't know. We can't necessarily say there is no life out there and we are the only forms of life in the whole entire universe. We can't say that. Even scientists have said we're not sure. But anyway, when it comes to mankind, when it comes to the jinn, we are part of that cause, right? When it comes to other natural phenomena in the world, in the universe, you don't find any other free will involved except God's will. So there you can straight up attribute it to God, okay? But when it comes to our actions or the actions of the jinn, who also have a free will that I explained before is based on intellect. It's not like animals. It's based on intellect and having that disposition to make the right decision. When we have something like that, and that's part of the cause, then we cannot attribute bad actions to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's pretty clear actually, right? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us, given us the power to do things, and then in the end, He has left the decision to us. So He's willing it indirectly, but we're the ones who are directly involved in willing it now. So when a bad action comes out of one of us, what happens is that a person who sees this can say, this person committed that act, but yes, in the grander scheme of things, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who created everything like this. So we have to understand, with mankind and whoever else that has free will, since there's another will involved other than God's will, things cannot be attributed always directly to God then. Okay, this is according to what he's saying here. And he explains the last paragraph of article number 30. He goes on and on and on. I don't know if it was necessary for him to explain this much. He kind of, explains further. He says, look, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, mankind. I got confused. It's hard because I'm looking at screens left and right and I'm trying to figure stuff out while I'm speaking. Sometimes it gets hard. He says mankind makes the decisions, Allah gives existence to that thing that they've made a decision on. A person wants to do a certain thing, he makes the decision, Allah gives permission for that thing to take place. Yeah, I think there's a verse in the Quran, there is a verse in the Quran that says Allah created you, وَمَا تَعْمَلُونَ, and what you do of actions and deeds. So He's the one who's giving existence to what? To that which I decided on. This is super important. If we don't figure this out, we get in trouble. And we'll start thinking that, okay, then even bad actions, we can attribute them to God. Okay. So that's that. That's article number 30. Article number 31, which is important because it has to do a lot with the shirk that the Quran speaks about when it came to different prophets and their people. So it's important. Article number 31 speaks about Tawhid, the fourth category of Tawhid, or Tawhid when it comes to Rububiyyah. That Rab means Lord, so Rububiyyah we could translate it, or the equivalent for that would be Lordship, and being Lord. what is meant by this? Let me talk about this a little bit first. When we say Lord, it doesn't just mean God. In Arabic or in Farsi, probably Urdu too, Rabb is the one who takes care of something, who runs something, who manages something. Okay, so Rabb has a different definition than, for example, Ilah would have. Ilah means an entity that you worship, someone that is deserving and worthy of worship. Okay, that's what Ilah means. Rabb means the one who manages, the one who runs everything, and so on. All right. So when it comes to rububiyyah, of the universe, running the universe, okay, Allah is the only one running it. Allah is the only one running it. So we have to talk about this because this is like super important, and there are different aspects to this discussion that he's going to get into. Okay, so Brother Shuja asks, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does something, does he use other means or is it direct from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? I just tried to explain that a few minutes ago, that yeah, if it's in this universe, it'll happen through cause and effect. Yeah, but in the end, he's the one at the top of that chain of causes. Okay, once again, there's a lot of details here that he has skipped, Ayatollah Subhani has skipped. And that's why I'm not going to get into them either, and then it'll just prolong the discussion as well. For now, what he wanted to get to us was that, look, independently, the one who creates is him. Sometimes, if you look at the philosophical meaning of creation, he brings into existence from nothingness. But when it comes to other things coming about, rain, for example, happening, for example, earthquakes happening, they will have their causes, but at the top of all of those causes will be God. The only exception is mankind and the jinn, because our will also has a say in things, and that's how he created us in this world. So when it comes to bad actions, for example, you won't attribute them directly to Allah. Okay, I'm going to leave it at that because there is more to talk about. Yeah, there is more to talk about, and that's a good question you asked. But as I said, he wants to keep it concise. Maybe he'll get into it later. Let's see. But for now, this is where we're at. All right, so going back to Article 31, he is talking about the fourth category of Tawhid, which is Tawhid al-Rububi. Tawhid in Rububiyyah, Lordship. God, when it comes to running the universe, not just creating it, running it, Allah is also running the show. He's the one in charge. He's the main one. He's at the top. He's at the top, and he is the one with the independence of running everything. All right, so let's talk about a few things here. Number one, Ayatollah Subhani, he makes a nice point here. He says, look, don't ask for a separate reason for Tawheed in Lordship. Don't ask for a separate reason when it comes to Tawheed in Lordship versus Tawheed in creation. In other words, the same reason we had for Tawheed in creation will also prove that he has Tawheed, and he's the only one when it comes to running the show as well, running the universe and managing everything. Why? Look, he says it's not like a factory where a person or a company will build a factory and then go, and the factory will run on its own, or like the watchmaker who makes the watch and then the watch just works on its own, and even if the watchmaker dies. No. Once again, he doesn't mention this, but I'm going to say it, that philosophically, when you look at creation itself, okay, creation in and of itself, which means to bring into existence, will come with the running of that existence as well, the management of the affairs of that existence as well. You cannot separate the two. If someone creates from nothingness something, right, creates something from nothingness, not only will they be the creator of that thing, they will also be the Lord and the Rabb of that thing as well. You can't separate these two. I'm surprised he doesn't say this, that philosophically this is the case. He doesn't really open that up too much and elaborate on it. He just leaves it at that. He just gives the example of how this universe is not like that factory that will run on its own, even if its creator is not there. Okay. He just says it in one line. Yeah, I'm seeing it right here. He says, but when it comes to creation of the universe, the creator will be the one who runs it as well. Okay. Then he moves on to the next discussion regarding Tawhid Rububi. He says, and he doesn't elaborate anymore. He moves on. He says, okay, when it comes to the history of the prophets, and this is the part he spends a lot of time on. He says, when we look at the history of the prophets, when we look at the Quran and all of these, the hadiths and stuff like that, he says that what we find is that the mushrikeen of the times of those prophets, the mushrikeen, their shirk and their polytheism wasn't that they believed in more than one God, maybe like, I don't know, some even maybe Hindus today might believe. I don't know. I don't want to misrepresent Hindus. I might be wrong on that. Let's just take that out. Let's erase that. He says the shirk that the people back then would commit, it wasn't like they say, okay, we have 5 gods, 5 Allahs, so to speak. No, it wasn't like that. He says their shirk was this category, had to do with this category of Tawhid. He says that was their problem. Their problem was that they didn't believe in Tawhid Rububi. That was their problem. Okay, let's talk about this a little bit. Give us some examples. He says, like, for example, look at Surah Yusuf. Surah Yusuf, or he gives an example before that. He says, look at the story of Prophet Ibrahim, which is the ancestor of Prophet Yusuf. Look at the story of Prophet Ibrahim. The people of his time, when you look at the Quran, he gives the verses, Surah An'am 76 to 78. When we look at them, they would worship the sun, the moon. Why? Because they would worship them as the ones who are running the earth, running the world. Yeah, the affairs of this world are intertwined with those lords, which are the sun and the moon and stuff, and which Prophet Ibrahim, he refuted that. He said, how can I worship them when they set? The sun sets, the moon sets. Yeah. So, for example, فَلَمَّا أَفَلَ قَالَ إِنِّي لَا أُحِبُّ الْآفِلِينَ. I can't worship, I don't love the afilin, those things that set and cease to exist for a while. How can the moon run the show when it's not there for a while? A Lord has to always be there. So he used these arguments against the people of his time. Surah Yusuf, he cites, he says, when Prophet Yusuf was in the prison, we all know, it's interesting, look at how these prophets would deal with their people. Prophet Yusuf, when he was in the prison, after the whole story of Zulaykha, he's in prison, he has 2 prison mates, or 2 cellmates. And these cellmates, they see some dreams, they come to Prophet Yusuf, apparently they could tell that he can interpret dreams because he's a righteous individual, so they asked him for the interpretation of their dreams. What did Prophet Yusuf say? Prophet Yusuf, when he wants to give them the interpretation of their dreams, nothing comes for free, right? So instead of just handing them the interpretation, what he does is first he calls them to Tawhid. But look at how he calls them to Tawhid. He says to them, before I give you your interpretations, أَأَرْبَابٌ مُتَفَرِّقُونَ خَيْرٌ أَمِ اللَّهُ الْوَاحِدُ الْقَهَّارُ. Which one is better? You tell me. Numerous arbab and rabs, lords. Rab here is other than Allah. So Rab, those entities that run things. Which one is better? He asks them. Arbabun mutafarriqun. Mutafarriq means like numerous, scattered Rabs. This itself shows that there's a problem with these lords. They're scattered. They're not even in one place. That's how weak they are. They're scattered around. Arbabun mutafarriqun. You 2 cellmates who are asking me for interpretation of your dreams. First, let me shake you a little bit, wake you up. Look at the things that you're worshipping. These lords that are scattered and spread out. Which one's better, these or Allahul Wahidul Qahhar, or Allah, the one and only and the all-powerful, Qahhar, the overpowering? Yeah, which one? Well, the way he worded the sentence gives you the answer too. Who wants a bunch of weak, scattered, spread out lords versus the number one almighty, all-powering, all-overpowering Lord? Huh? So anyway, that he says that's an example of Prophet Yusuf's time. Then he brings a couple of verses from the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's time. وَاتَّخَذُوا مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ آلِهَةً لِيَكُونُوا لَهُمْ عِزًّا. That they took, aside from Allah, in other words, in addition to Allah, they took some other gods as well. Why? So that these gods can give them honor. Like, these are our lords. They can point to them. This is our God. That's my God. Things like that. So when you can point to a God, right? It's better than just saying, oh, I have a God that no one can see. Think about it. So like the Meccans back then, they might have, like, when people would come to Mecca, they could point to their idols. Look at this God of ours, which is like the biggest and most mightiest idol of them all, So that they could gain this izzah, they took some idols as their lords. So this verse isn't saying that they took them as the Allah or next to the Allah. No, they had Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but then there was a problem. The problem was that they had other lords next to him. Other lords and gods, just for the purpose of bringing them some honor. Okay? وَاتَّخَذُوا مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ آلِهَةً لَعَلَّهُمْ يُنصَرُونَ لَا يَسْتَطِيعُونَ نَصْرَهُمْ وَهُمْ لَهُمْ جُندٌ مُحْضَرُونَ. So it says they took other than and aside from Allah again. You see that wording comes again. They took some aliha, some gods, so that they could be helped and aided by these gods. Aided by them. Not that they believed that these gods are the almighty God that created and all that kind of stuff. No. For that, they believed in Allah Himself. But they needed some help and some aid. They felt that they need some aid. So to get that aid, they have different gods that they're going to try to get aid from. You see, once again, and when it comes to their affairs, they need help. They need aid. That's why they have other gods other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is a problem in Allah's books. Okay? Ayat al-Subhani concludes from these two verses. There's other verses too, that verses like these show us that the mushrikeen of our Prophet's time believed that these idols or these gods can be the source of good and bad. And this is why they would worship them. It's kind of like, let's get their attention, or let's prove to them that we like them and stuff like that, so that their good reaches us instead of their bad. So they felt like, not that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't exist, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not the sole creator of the universe. No, it wasn't about that. Allah is that. Ayatollah Subhani says this. But when it came to good and bad, harm in this world, the affairs of this universe and this earth and this world, that's when they would rely on their idols. That was a problem. So they had a problem with not Tawhid when it came to creation, Tawhid in Khaliqiyya, or Tawhid Dhati, or Tawhid Sifati. They didn't have a problem there. Their problem was Tawhid Rububi. And I think that even today, like this idea that Shias are also tainted with this and falsely accused with being mushrik, is the fact that they have shirk. In some people's eyes, we have shirk in Rububi, in Tawhid Rububi, or the next one that we'll get to later, inshallah. The fifth category that we'll talk about probably next week. Okay? So, we have a question that I think I didn't see. I'm seeing it now. Brother Bilal says, Imam Ali in Nahj al-Balagha, the way he describes the origin of the universe is very similar to the Big Bang. My question, you mentioned attribute of God as creating out of nothing. He wills and it becomes, but how? What he wills just forms, like an electron non-existing now exists? I guess so. This how creation works itself is something that has to be dissected. Is God, like, for example, if there's a giraffe right now, God just creates a giraffe, or no? A giraffe is born through another giraffe who came from somewhere else, from another giraffe, all the way up. And yeah, you're saying it seems like Imam Ali and Nahj al-Balagha might even trace it back to the Big Bang. Our theologians will say, even if there's a Big Bang, let's say there's a needle point of something that exists, that comes out of nowhere, that explodes and everything comes out of it, where did that one needle point of existence come from? That's where they'll ask the question. And whatever was within that needle point, so that won't disprove God's Tawhid when it comes to Khaliqiyya, once again, in creation. Okay, I hope that answers your question, at least in a nutshell. All right, coming back to what we were talking about here. This Tawhid Rububi was the problem of the people of the Prophet's times, from Prophet Ibrahim all the way down to our Holy Prophet. To prove this even more, look, he says, Subhanahu brings a nice verse. I like this verse. The verse is in Surah Baqarah, verse 165. وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَتَّخِذُ مِنْ دُونِ اللَّهِ أَنْدَادًا يُحِبُّونَهُمْ كَحُبِّ اللَّهِ. That there are some people who will bring, aside from Allah, in addition to Allah, andadan. Andad is the plural of nid. Okay? Nid means mithl, means shibh, means something that is similar to something else. Okay? So andad means something similar. Things that are similar. It says they would take, other than Allah, andadan, things that they would compare to Allah, and they would strike some similitude between Allah and those things. Idols or whatever it was. Sometimes even maybe angels. I don't know. يُحِبُّونَهُمْ كَحُبِّ اللَّهِ. And they would love these idols and other gods the same way they love Allah. So they love Allah, and as a matter of fact, look at this. The reason why they would love them, is because they would see similarity between them and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's a cool verse that he cites here. Yeah. But someone might say, well, in what sense were they seeing similarity? Other verses showed us that the fact that they could be the origin of good or evil. Okay? That they can be the origin of, not that they are like God in creation or like God in their essence. No. All right? Or another verse he brings here. He just brings lots of verses. And as a matter of fact, I like this. This is how I think we need to study theology, is to also go through Quran as well. As I said before, we're not trying to learn things so that we can prove it to other atheists. We want to learn things just to strengthen our own faith and to become more aware of what's in our holy book of the Quran. Yeah? So these verses that are coming, someone might say, well, an atheist won't accept these verses if I use them. Who cares? That's not the point of these sessions. The point is for us to gain some backbone regarding our holy book and our faith, our religion. So another verse that he cites, Tallahi in kunna lafi dalalin mubin. Apparently it's on the Day of Judgment. Surah Shu'ara, verse 97 and 98. Tallahi, by Allah, we were in a clear misguidance and deviance. The people who are probably going to the hellfire will say. Why? إِذْ نُسَوِّيكُمْ بِرَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. When they're speaking to their other gods, their idols, on the Day of Judgment, they say the problem was that we would, see you similar to who? رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. The word of Rabb is used again. The one who is the Lord of the Alameen, of the one who takes care of the Alameen. Yeah, runs the show, as if you all also were running the show. Now, right here, before I forget, this is also a verse that can be cited for God being in charge of things. The one that says, كُلَّ يَوْمٍ هُوَ فِي شَأْنٍ. Allah subhanahu doesn't bring this verse. I think it would have been good for him to bring it here. That every day, Allah is busy with something. Now, this is, I would say, a very metaphorical verse. And the translation is even more metaphorical. Okay? He's busy with, nothing can make God busy. لا يشغله سمع عن سمع. The Quran says, no ear can distract him from other ears. Okay? I hope that's a verse. Sometimes you're not sure if it's a verse or not. Anyway, I think that's a verse. That's somewhere in the Quran. I can look it up real quick as I speak. Or if someone else can look it up for me, that'll be nice. So this verse says, every day he is busy with something, with an affair. كُلَّ يَوْمٍ هُوَ فِي شَأْنٍ. Every day he is busy with something. This shows that, okay, he's running the show too. It's not that he just created it, and then, okay, I created it now. Let's put it, let's go to the side and, let's go and rest or something. No, that's not how it works. Okay, moving on to the next verse that he brings here. He says, قُلْ مَنْ يَرْزُقُكُمْ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ وَالْأَرْضِ. Okay, so now these are specific instances of God and Him, being the cause of different things happening. Just 1 second, if you can give me a moment for this app to open up. While it's opening up, it says, قُلْ مَنْ يَرْزُقُكُم مِنَ السَّمَاءِ وَالْأَرْضِ أَمَّنْ يَمْلِكُ السَّمْعَ وَالْأَبْصَارَ وَمَنْ يُخْرِجُ الْحَيَّ مِنَ الْمَيِّتِ وَمَنْ يُخْرِجُ الْمَيِّتَ مِنَ الْحَيِّ. So there's a list of things that he mentions here. Okay, my app opened up. 1 second. Yeah, sorry, that's not a verse of the Quran. That's what I felt like it's a little suspect. I think it's a dua. I'm pretty sure it's in one of our duas. Ya man la yashghaluhu sam'un an sam'. That's what it is. Yeah, it's not a verse of the Quran. So I just want to make sure about that. Something was bothering me about it. I was like, are you sure it's a verse? No. But anyway, we have that in our duas. Ya man la yashghaluhu sam'un an sam'. Okay, anyway, let's come back to Surah Yunus, verse 31, the verse that I just recited. قُلْ مَنْ يَرْزُقُكُم مِنَ السَّمَاءِ وَالْأَرْضِ. Say, who is the one who sustains you, sends you sustenance from the heaven, from the sky and the earth? And مَنْ يَمْلِكُ السَّمْعَ وَالْأَبْصَارِ. Who's the one who possesses all hearing and sight and eyes? وَمَنْ يُخْرِجُ الْحَيَّ مِنَ. Who takes out the living from the dead and the dead from the living? وَمَنْ يُدَبِّرُ الْأَمْرِ. Who is the one who does tadbir? Like, this word literally means to manage things. Who is the one who manages the affair, meaning all affairs? And this part's super important. فَسَيَقُولُونَ اللَّهِ. This is super important. They will say, the mushrikeen of that time will say, Allah. They themselves knew it was Allah, yet they would bring in the idols and worship them. Why? Because sometimes they believe that these things also have a power and authority. Sometimes, as the verse said, لِيَكُونُوا لَهُمْ عِزَّةً, just so they would bring them some honor. And look at how the verse ends. It says, فَقُلْ. If this is their answer, that Allah is the one, أَفَلَا تَتَّقُونَ, then say to them, then why aren't you going to be God wary? Be careful. Why are you including and involving other things other than Allah when it comes to you? The Lordship of the heavens and the earth. Why? It's for your own, it's to secure your own interests then, apparently. So this is really crazy. It shows that the people at that time even, they knew what they were doing is wrong. The polytheists of Mecca, you know how much money they would make due to these idols that they had. I mean, this would go against their interests if there was no idols. Heck, I don't even know. Maybe they wouldn't even worship these idols too much. I don't know. Although in the movies it shows that they were worshiping them, but it seems that they wanted this to be the case because it was in their interest. That's why the verse says, أَفَلَا تَتَّقُونَ. Aren't you afraid of Allah? Beware of Allah. Be wary of Allah. Have taqwa of Allah. If you know the answer to this question of who is the one who sustains from the heavens and the earth, or from the sky and the earth, and who's the one who possesses this, that, if you know the answer to that is God, Allah, then why are you bringing anyone else into the equation? And I think this is the last verse here that he brings to show that, yeah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who possesses Tawhid when it comes to Lordship. قُلْ لِمَنِ الْأَرْضِ. Say, who does the earth belong to? وَمَنْ فِيهَا. And whoever's in it. إِن كُنْتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ. If you know. سَيَقُولُونَ لِلَّهِ. They'll say it all belongs to Allah. قُلْ أَفَلَا تَذَكَّرُونَ. Aren't you going to wake up? Aren't you going to remember what you're doing is wrong? Will this not shake you? Will this not wake you up then? You know yourselves that it belongs to Allah. When it belongs to Allah, that means He's the one who's running it. قُلْ مَنْ رَبُّ السَّمَاوَاتِ السَّابِعِ وَرَبُّ الْعَرْشِ الْعَظِيمِ. Say, who is the Lord of the 7 heavens and the grand throne, whatever that means now. We don't want to get into that right now. Who is the Lord? سَيَقُولُونَ لِلَّهِ. They'll say that it's Allah's. Once again, قُلْ أَفَلَا تَتَّقُونَ. Again, the same ending. Then aren't you not going to be pious? Are you not going to be God-weary? That what you're doing is wrong? bringing other than Allah into the picture, and so on. All right? Now, I was waiting for him to bring this verse of the Quran, and he does. He says, these are the clearest verses that say they were doing this not because they didn't believe in Allah, right? And that is the verse that says, قُلْ أَمَا نَعْبُدُهُمْ إِلَّا لِيُقَرِّبُونَ إِلَى اللَّهِ زُلْفَى. We only worship these because these are what get us closer to Allah. These are the medium between us and Allah. Okay, that shows that they believe, because as kids growing up, brothers and sisters, we were always told that, yeah, they didn't believe in Allah, they believed in idols. No, the Quran again and again and again is saying that they believed in Him. I mean, if they didn't believe in Him, then they were in very deep trouble. They believed in Him, right? But they had tainted this belief in God with belief in other things as well. Allah says, no. Who told you that this is what's going to get you close to me? Did I give you a sultan? Did I give you a proof for this or not? I didn't. So you're making it up yourselves that these are getting us close to Allah. That's why the Quran continues, it says, Surah Zumar verse 3, Inna Allah la yahdi man huwa kadhimun kaffar. Allah is not going to guide the one who is a liar and is a kaffar, not just a kafir, kaffar. Kaffar means like at the end of kufr, because they know exactly what they're doing, yet they are still continuing to do that which they know is 100% wrong. Okay? He gives one more example where in these it gives another example of verses that are talking about different things that God is in charge of, and in the end how God says yudabbirul amr, again Allah governs and manages the affair, meaning all affairs. Okay, Surah Ra'd verse 2, Allah is the one who lifted the heavens without any pillars to hold them that you can see. This itself is a cool verse of the Quran. He lifted it with pillars that you can't see. He lifted them without pillars that you can see, which some might say that it implies that there are pillars that are not visible that are holding the heavens. Some call it, all of this, the orbiting and the gravitational pull and how everything is canceling each other out, and all of these different forces that are keeping everything in orbit. So some people they use this verse for that. It's an interesting verse. He's the one who lifted the heavens without pillars that you can see, and then sat on the throne, whatever that means. Of course, it's metaphorical. God won't have a throne somewhere in the sky. وَسَخَّرَ الشَّمْسَ وَالْقَمَرَ. He, what's the word for this? Sakhara. He tamed, let's call it, tamed the sun and the moon. In other words, they do things in a specific manner. It's not that they just randomly move around. Once again, they have their own orbit, and He is the one controlling them, so to speak. Each of them is flowing and moving in its the way it's supposed to. Yudabbirul amr. Allah governs the affairs. Okay. So once again, another verse. You see, once again, he just brings these verses, listing them one after another. Okay. Finally, we have to end with a question, though. And then we'll answer it too right now. The important question is, wait a minute. A couple of these verses says, Yudabbirul amr, mudabbirul amr. Yeah? That He governs. He's the one who runs. He's the one who's managing things, right? Question. In Surah Nazi'at, verse 5, and other verses too maybe, but this one's the most clearest one. It says, فَالْمُدَبِّرَاتِ أَمْرًا. The same exact thing that is attributed to God in some of these verses that we covered right now in this session, that exact same thing is attributed to someone or things other than Allah. How does that work? فَالْمُدَبِّرَاتِ أَمْرًا means by. Allah is swearing by the angels that are mudabbir of amr, the ones who govern and manage the affairs. Wait a minute. The other verses said Allah is the one who manages everything. If you noticed in the beginning of when we got into this article, I might have said this once or twice, that Allah When we say Tawhid or Rububi, Tawhid when it comes to lordship and running things and being in charge of things and managing the affairs, that means that he is the only independent entity and being that is running things. But he can delegate to others as well. He can delegate to others. They will also be Mudabbirul Amr now. But there's a big difference between the Mudabbirul Amr of an angel and Mudabbir Tadbirul Amr of Allah. Allah's is independent. Theirs is totally dependent on the permission of Allah. Okay? It's interesting that when it says in those verses that I just covered, the short one that said, مَا نَعْبُدُهُمْ إِلَّا لِيُقَرِّبُونَا إِلَى اللَّهِ زُلْفَى. We only worship them because they get us closer to Allah. Allah doesn't say that's not possible. Yeah? Allah says you're lying. Who said that these are the things that get you close to me? Who said that these idols, if you're going to them because you see them as some origin of good and evil, who told you that I have put them in charge? This is a block of wood, man. This is a piece of stone that you just chipped away at, and you've turned into an idol that looks like a person. Who says that I gave them this authority to do Tadbir al-Amr? It doesn't mean that Allah was angry at the polytheists and idol worshippers because they believed that anyone other than God can run the show as well. No. It says, who said? He says, I didn't. These are just pieces of wood. I did not give them permission. I have not done anything with them. They're not in charge of anything. That's different than saying, okay, Allah has given some authority to the angels so that they run things in this universe. 1. 2. When Allah puts them in charge of things, since they are dependent totally on Allah, they still won't deserve worship. Only the independent Lord, the independent Mudabbir deserves to be worshipped, not anyone else. So we have two major problems when it came to the mushrikeen of the Prophet's time. They weren't believing in more than one Allah. That wasn't their problem. They had two other problems. Number one, they would attribute lordship. In other words, they felt that these idols are the origin of some good and evil. 1. And the second problem was they would worship them too. That's number 2. That was a problem as well. When it comes to the angels, the Muslims, they believe the angels, they have some authority, but not independently. Like how the disbelievers believed in the idols, that these idols can do whatever they want without Allah being involved. Allah has delegated things to these idols, they do whatever they want. No. They're excuse me, I forgot what I was talking about. But yeah, excuse me. The Muslims didn't believe the same way the mushrikeen believed. They didn't believe that these angels, they can do whatever they want now. No. You have a specific task Allah has given you when it comes to the affairs of the universe. Number 1. And number 2, the Muslims never ever, the thought would never cross their minds to think of even worshipping these angels, because at the end of the day, they're not independent when they're carrying out certain tasks. Now, someone might ask, why does Allah need angels to begin with? Okay, isn't He all powerful? That's another story. Allama Tabatabai in Tafsir of Al-Mizan has explained that very nicely and in depth under this verse of فَالْمُدَبِّرَاتِ أَمْرًا in Surah Nazi'at. That's a whole different discussion I'm not going to get into. So I'm going to end it here. Alhamdulillah, we made it through all 3 of the articles that I wanted to make it through. Once again, if you have any questions, tonight you guys were quiet. Inshallah, you were just so blown away that you just were listening and you didn't have questions. No, I'm just kidding. It was a very normal session, actually. So if you have any questions, inshallah, send them in. Share the page or the videos with whoever you think might benefit from them. And inshallah, next week, we will continue our session. Once again, we had some technical difficulties in the beginning. I'm going to try to fix those. But yeah, if we ever do run into the technical difficulties again, alhamdulillah, tonight was better than last week. We just log off and we log back on again and take it from there, inshallah. Thank you very much for tuning in. Nas'alukum ad-du'a. Keep us in your du'as. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.